What's up guys, so we're going to be going over the Vex Mythoclast once again. In my first video just showing off gameplay with the weapon, I said I want to make another video once I got it on my account, which I still haven't, but well, my friends did get it. And I said I want to make a video comparing the linear fusion portion of the weapon to other lanes in the game to see where it stacks up, and that is what we're going to be doing today. And before we begin, my code ERROR is going to be 30% off on GFULE through tomorrow. Link to the store will be in the comments and description. In the first video we quickly went over what the weapon does. Pretty much it's a full auto fusion rifle that will get stacks of overcharge. Once you get up to 6 overcharge stacks, you'll be able to convert it to a linear fusion mode. And as we show off in that video, red bars count as 1 stack, majors will count as 2 stacks, and I theorize that bosses would be 3. The Lost Sector boss was still 2, but that is considered a major in the game. And I still didn't really test it versus a boss because even if it was 3 versus boss, what's that even do? The fight's already over, so it doesn't really matter. But overall, in that first initial reaction to the gun, I felt like the regular primary part of the weapon was decent, it was usable, but then the linear fusion part just felt like it wasn't doing quite that much damage because it pretty much didn't one hit a lot of these majors in the lost sectors, which a lot of other specials and heavies definitely do. One thing that is super annoying about this weapon is if you get stacks of overcharge and swap off the weapon and back onto it, you'll lose all of your stacks. Same thing if you preload the linear fusion part and swap, it will also disappear. So there's no way to stow stacks of overcharge or the overcharge itself. The first thing I want to do is look at the primary version of this weapon. It hits 1844 on Carl. And now look at the rate of fire of 1 full magazine, so 33 shots. Then take roughly 5.3 seconds. So for the primary part of Vex, the damage per shot was 1844, which meant 11,430 DPS. So if you know a lot of DPS numbers of primaries, that is not good. So comparing that to the stochastic variable, which is among the best primaries in the entire game, and we're using one with multi-kill clip, which is the highest damage buff, this is pretty much the highest DPS primary in the game right now. As you see on Carl, we're going to be doing 1778, so just a little bit below the myth class. But as you imagine, we're shooting, you know, a good 2.5 times faster. So the damage per shot was pretty much the same, but the DPS is now 27,389, which is 140% higher than that of the Vex Mythoclast for the primary part of the weapon. So obviously the Vex is nowhere near some of the meta SMGs in the game. So looking at a 450 RPM auto rifle, which is pretty much as close as you can get to the Mythoclast in the energy slot. Looking at damage of that with 1 for all on Carl, it's like for 1839, so pretty much the exact same damage per bullet. But as you imagine, the rate of fire is going to be quicker than that of Mythoclast, which means the DPS is going to be roughly 25% higher at 14.2 thousand. And it's not like 450 RPM ARs or even meta, so the fact that this is still better than the myth class just goes to show how bad the myth class really is. So the primary part of myth class definitely isn't special in any way. Just looking at DPS numbers alone, you can just tell how slow you're going to be killing enemies compared to some of the other options in the game. But now we look at the linear fusion part of the weapon to see if that is better. Look at damage on Carl. It's only hit for 32,570. Now if we go and look at the rate of fire, you get 3 shots of it. That's going to take with the charge time at just over 4 seconds. So once again, per shot 32,570, which means 24.4 thousand DPS. So that is obviously once again not very good. So comparing it to some other things in the game, let's compare it directly to a linear fusion. So something like the Threaded Needle with Warple, which is one of the better linear fusions in the game. Look at damage on Carl. It's going to be a lot higher at 51,835. Now looking at rate of fire of this. Not only does it do way more damage, it shoots way quicker. 3 shots taken 2.3 seconds, which means the DPS was 177% higher, so nearly 3x the DPS. So clearly the linear fusion part of Vex Mythoclast is nowhere near that of a real linear fusion. So let's try it versus a regular fusion. So using the null composure with high impact reserves, looking at just the 3 shots like we were with everything else. Looking at damage on Carl, with high impact reserves, it's gonna go up per shot. And on average, as you'll see here in a second, it was doing 33,950 per shot, which is pretty much on par with the Mythoclast. But once again, it's the rate of fire that will make the DPS much higher at 38,146, which is going to be 56% higher than that of the Mythoclast. So far, the primary version was outclassed by pretty much everything in the game, and it looks like the same for the linear fusion part. We can also compare it to a sniper rifle, so 90 RPM with Warple. Look at damage on Carl. It's only hit for 22,805. So finally the myth class is out damaging the sniper, but once again the rate of fire is just a hard carry to the DPS, and the DPS is almost 52,000, which is 113% higher than that of the Vex Mythoclast. So just like the primary version, pretty much everything is out DPSing the linear fusion part of Mythoclast, We could also compare it to a few shotguns, but as you guys know, something like the first and last out will do laps around the 24,000 DPS number of Mythoclast, and will be pretty close to the linear fusion rifle number of almost like 70,000. So Vex Mythoclast is a dual purpose weapon, but Bungie honestly forgot to make either portion of the weapon worth using. The good news is, in the recent Firing Range podcast, a dev said they're already looking into buffing the weapon, which is obviously great news because it just simply needs to be way better. Usually when Exotic comes out in Destiny 2, it follows one of three trends. The first being is just right, it's not too good, not too bad, and is good at all the stuff that they intended it to be good at, and it's pretty much just fine as it is. Or the weapon is way overtuned, really strong, and everyone gets it, abuses the crap out of it for a few weeks or a month, then they nerf it down to where it should be, and everyone is super disappointed because it feels way worse than it did, and then the weapon is pretty much never used again. Or in the case of the Vex Mythoclast, the weapon is extremely weak, and everyone's disappointed at first, but then it gets buffed to where it should have been, and then it feels really good in comparison, and a lot of people use it, and overall it's kind of a happy ending. In theory, in all three of the scenarios, the weapon ends up being the exact same, but the way the community treats the weapon will be vastly different, and I think the situation where it's weak at first then becomes good is almost the better one, because eventually it gets to where it should have been and it feels way better than it was at launch, so it just feels better compared to when it gets nerfed. It feels way worse, even though in reality it's the exact same, if that makes any sense. So how should they buff this weapon? Well, the primary version just needs to be way better by either increasing the damage per shot or the rate of fire, but I'm sure they're going to do the damage per shot, and honestly it needs a pretty big buff in terms of damage per shot. As you see, something like a 900 RPM SMG was doing nearly the same damage per shot as this and has over 2.5 times the rate of fire, so obviously that makes no sense, especially given the fact that the Mythoclast is an exotic weapon. Then for the linear fusion part, I see no reason why it shouldn't be doing the same damage per shot as a real linear fusion rifle. It should be doing roughly like 51,000 per shot, and the reason that would be perfectly balanced is because it has a lower rate of fire, so right there the DPS isn't as good, and you can only use 3 shots of it at a time, so it'd pretty much only be used versus like mini bosses or majors, or you'd use it for like the first 3 shots of a boss fight and swap over to your heavy weapon or something like that. And I think that would be perfectly balanced. I don't see why that would be broken in any way, because with the damage it does per shot right now, sometimes it doesn't kill like majors in one hit, so it just feels completely useless, and I find myself not even wanting to proc that part of the weapon and just use the primary part, which speaks a lot about how bad the linear fusion part is, because the primary part isn't that good in the first place. And that kind of brings me to my last point, that exotic primaries have to be extremely good to be useful in PvE. A vast majority of the time you're going to be using exotic heavy weapon, so for exotic primary to be useful, it has to be extremely good. There's all kinds of really good exotic primaries in Destiny 2 that just simply aren't used because you're using something like Anarchy, Deathbringer, you know, whatever, most of the time, and you don't really have room for exotic primary. So for exotic primary to be good, it has to be like super outstanding in some way, and that is why I'm kind of confused with the Vex Mythoclast, because not only is it exotic primary, it's also a raid exotic, so it's definitely one of the exotics that you would want to like overtune, and then if it's too strong, roll it back in, instead of making it too weak at first, because if it's too weak, there's like no chance that exotic primary is going to ever be used. It has to be super strong to be useful, and that is why I'm just kind of confused why they kind of went conservative with this weapon. But overall, I think that sums up all my thoughts on the weapon. In the background, there was some Strike gameplay. I'm not sure how much longer there is to it, because with editing my voice and all that good stuff, I'm not sure how far I'm into the gameplay. But I pretty much cleared out this entire portion of the Strike in 4 minutes with the Mythoclast, and I did the same thing the other day with the stochastic variable in roughly 2 minutes, and both those clips were with just Devour and the weapon. So yeah, Mythoclast just isn't it. Anyways, let me know what you think about it if you have it already on your account. As I've heard from pretty much everyone that has it, it's just super underwhelming, and that lines up with all my playtime and testing with it also. Anyways, thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.